This story happened when I was working as a photographer's assistant at a production house. During that time, there was one job that required going to a strange place, not on the mainland. We had to take a boat for several hours. And what I encountered, I must say, was something that haunted me to the point that I will never forget it. Before we dive into our scary story, we would like to ask everyone to like and subscribe to support us in continuing to bring you more terrifying tales in the future. Let me begin the story. It goes back to about 10 years ago when I had just graduated with a degree and didn't have much experience. But since I liked photography and video work, I applied for a job as a photographer's assistant at a company. In the early stages, my passion was quite strong, and I set a goal that within 2 to 3 years, I would become a photographer. So, I tried to learn and remember what my seniors taught me. But as time went on, those who have worked in this field will know well that it's truly hell. Some places pay daily wages, there's no social security, you have to work day and night without overtime pay, you have to travel to different provinces, and you have to do labor-intensive work. Some nights, I only slept for 2 hours. Some nights, I didn't sleep at all. Many times, I had to drive even though I hadn't slept the whole night. When I gathered my thoughts, I realized that I couldn't continue. Although all the seniors were nice, I wasn't suited for this line of work. I didn't want to live like this for the rest of my life, so I decided to resign after the end of the year. But then, in that month, I saw the work schedule which showed that I had to work every day without a single day off. So, I walked into my boss's office and wrote my resignation letter immediately. However, the company had a rule that after submitting a resignation letter, one had to continue working for another 30 days. I agreed to that. During that period, just before the end of the year, I saw that there was one job which was strange because everyone was reluctant to go. Nobody wanted to sign up. So, I asked what was happening and why no one wanted to go. What's going on? Why doesn't anyone want to go? Is it a free job or what? Hey, it's not a free job. It's a paid job, but it's for the boss's relative. It's not a job for TV, and it might require staying overnight for several nights. That's why no one wants to go. One of the lighting crew answered me, but I didn't think much of it until another senior told me, "Don't worry too much. If you want to go, just go. They usually offer extra money because this relative of the boss is wealthy, owns a lot of land, and you might get to travel. Anyway, since you're leaving, why not go and do this last job as a send-off?" Even though I heard that, I still wasn't interested because I didn't want to work anymore. Turned out that eventually they had to draw lots for it and 6 people had to go. One of them ended up being me. I was really unlucky. Until the day we had to go, when I read the script, I found out that the job was to film a family reunion. I was very confused about why they would film that. The location was also unusual. We had to drive south and then take a boat to get to the island where their house was. That day, I sat in the car for 7 to 8 hours until we arrived in the evening. When we got there, I saw that the homeowner had arranged for a boat to pick us up. It was a boat they hired from the locals, so we all had to help carry the equipment from the van to the pier and then load it onto the boat. After we finished loading everything, the 6 of us boarded the boat with a single driver, making it a total of 7 people. As the boat set off, I felt that the atmosphere was eerie. The waves and the clouds ahead looked like a storm was brewing, and the sky was getting dark. Felt like there was a storm coming. As we continued, the boat had probably traveled halfway when, under the dim sky, we all saw something that caught our eye. At first, I thought it looked like a sack, a water barrel, or some large piece of rotting fish. However, Jade, one of our team members who was tall and probably had a better view, turned pale. When others asked him, Jade said, Hey, there's a person. Someone is swimming towards us." As soon as Jade said that, the boat driver asked if it was really a person, to which Jade confirmed it was definitely the shape of a person. He could see arms flailing as if trying to swim towards us. This made the boat driver tell us to find a life buoy, and he decided to steer the boat towards that person immediately. At that time, the boat driver didn't go fast, fearing a collision, so the boat slowly drifted closer. As we got nearer, probably within 50 meters, believe it or not, one of the other seniors, who was the most fearful person named Bay, suddenly said, "Hey, stop. Uncle, stop right now. That's not a person. That's a corpse. A corpse floating towards us." At that moment, when Bay spoke, I got goosebumps because I was already a fearful person. I also saw the same thing. It didn't seem to be a person, but rather a corpse floating face down, bloated in the middle of the sea. The body was so decomposed it was nearly falling apart. At that time, many people tried to call the police, but it turned out the boat driver said there was no need to call because there was no signal in the area. The signal would only be available once we reached the island. Then the uncle said there was nothing we could do except to take the body with us because it might be someone from the island. It could be someone's sibling or child, and we couldn't just leave them because the people on the island never abandoned each other. We all looked at each other, bewildered, not knowing what to do. As the boat slowly drifted closer, the uncle turned off the engine. And it was true. As we got closer, we all saw that it was indeed a corpse. But what we saw didn't end there. The corpse in front of us was not whole but was half a body, with the lower half missing entirely. All that was left was the upper part, from the waist up, with decayed intestines visible, the arms and legs swollen, the neck nearly detached from the body, floating face down and emitting a stench that we could hardly bear. The uncle then said, "It looks like we can't pull it up. It's too decomposed. I'll have to drag it to the island. I'll go down and tie it with a rope, then attach it to the back of the boat." After that, what I saw was the uncle taking a coil of rope, going to the back of the boat and getting into the water. He tied the rope around the body and then attached it to the metal part at the back of the boat. Afterward, he swam to the front, washed himself off, climbed back up, took off his clothes, leaving only his pants, and drove the boat onward. After experiencing that, I asked myself what kind of madness this was and what to do next. Why was the corpse cut in half like that? But they discussed that it might be due to being eaten by fish after being in the water for a long time. As for the smell, it was unbearable. Even when I folded my shirt 4 to 5 layers and covered my nose, it still didn't help. As the boat continued, more misfortune struck. The boat couldn't go fast because we didn't want the corpse to come loose, so it started raining, and the sky turned completely dark. The thing I feared most happened. A strong storm hit, and the uncle said it looked like we couldn't continue and might not make it. We had to stop at a small island first. He changed the course to a small uninhabited island with only a beach and mountains. That evening, some people took shelter on the boat while others went ashore. As evening turned to night, around 10 o'clock, the rain stopped and the storm calmed down, so the uncle decided to continue driving the boat. At that point, I walked back to the boat, sat in my usual seat, and as the uncle drove off, about 5 kilometers out, I heard someone shout, "The corpse is gone! The body is missing. Only the end of the rope is floating in the sea." Everyone was shocked upon hearing that, but I must admit I felt relieved and realized that I hadn't smelled the stench for a while, so the body must have been gone for some time. The uncle stopped the boat, took a large flashlight, and shone it into the water, but it was impossible to see anything. There was no way to find the body. Everyone resigned themselves to fate, realizing we probably wouldn't find it again. The uncle then continued driving the boat to the island. We finally arrived at our destination around 11 o'clock. I saw that the client, who was the boss's relative, had sent a van to pick us up. We unloaded our equipment and loaded it into the van to go to the event location. The boat driver went his separate way, saying he would handle reporting the lost body to the authorities. My group didn't want to get involved anymore, so we took the van to the host's house, where they had prepared another house for us to sleep in. That night, we checked our equipment and set up everything for the morning so we wouldn't have to rush and be disorganized. During that time, there was one senior named Aiden, who I noticed hadn't spoken to anyone since getting off the boat and taking the van. He didn't help check the equipment and just sat in a corner of the room, not talking to anyone. I was puzzled but left him alone. As it got very late and everyone had gone to bed, I noticed that Aiden was still sitting in the same spot, eyes wide open, in a dark corner, looking as if he had something on his mind that he didn't want to share. Eventually, I fell asleep. After a while, I was awakened by a loud noise, the sound of two people arguing. When I opened my eyes, I saw Aiden and Jade struggling over a knife. In no time, Jade was stabbed in the stomach and collapsed immediately. At that moment, when Aiden got hold of the knife, what I saw was that he didn't harm anyone else. He didn't even threaten anyone. Instead, he slowly bent down, lifted the knife beside his body, and started to cut his own thigh. What we saw was shocking. As soon as the knife slashed down, Aiden's blood flowed profusely. Everyone who was standing there rushed to grab the knife, but it seemed like Aiden had extraordinary strength. 3 seniors, not including me or Jade, were all injured. I stood there in shock, smelling the metallic scent of blood everywhere. Finally, they managed to wrest the knife away and pinned Aiden down. I hurried to get the homeowner to come to the house. At that moment, I wondered if this was why they didn't want to come, fearing something strange might happen. When the homeowner arrived, he immediately said, "This isn't something from the house, but something you brought in yourselves." I was bewildered, and everyone else was too. The homeowner then reached into his waistband, pulled out a gun, and pointed it at Aiden's head, making everyone freeze because it seemed extreme to the point of killing someone. At that moment, the homeowner chanted something, cocked the gun, and pulled the trigger. However, there was no gunshot sound. It turned out the gun was unloaded. As soon as he pulled the trigger, to my disbelief, Aiden seemed to snap back to consciousness as if he had just woken up. He raised his hands in a Y, a Thai gesture of respect, and apologized to everyone around him. We then helped stop the bleeding by tying a rope around his thigh and called for a boat to come and get him. At that moment, Aiden raised his hands in a Y again and said he had a confession to make. He confessed that he had done something he shouldn't have. He admitted that he was the one who cut the rope when we had stopped to take shelter from the rain on another island. The corpse then floated away and sank back into the sea. He had been scared and didn't want to be stuck with the corpse, so he cut the rope and kicked the corpse away. Afterward, he pretended not to know anything until we were on the boat again. At that point, he saw that besides us, there was someone else climbing up from the water at the back of the boat. He then sat still, not speaking or looking at anyone. When we arrived at the house, he still saw that person following us inside, but in a way that the figure floated around, appearing here and there with only the upper half of the body visible. Aiden was so terrified that he tried to sit still. Finally, after he fell asleep, he woke up to find himself in the middle of a knife fight with Jade and everyone else, having already cut his own leg. At that moment, Aiden's blood began to flow profusely, so we had to work hard to stop the bleeding. Ultimately, we had to take a speedboat back that very night, instead of the regular boat we had come in. Once we returned to the shore, we immediately coordinated with the hospital to take everyone in. The conclusion of that night revealed that Aiden nearly died. The major artery in his leg was severed. Jade, who initially seemed to be fine, turned out to have the tip of the knife puncture his stomach, nearly causing him to die as well. As for the others, one person had a cut on their left pinky, losing about a centimeter of flesh but was otherwise fine. Another person had the tip of the knife nick their eyebrow, while the last person was safe, only suffering bruises from trying to wrestle the knife and falling onto a chair. After the incident, we talked about it when we went back to gather our things. The homeowner told us that the corpse we found was likely a fisherman because, as is known, there are many incidents at sea. Sometimes people get murdered and the bodies are thrown into the water. Most of the time, the bodies are never found. Even with the help of the law, it's very difficult. That corpse, after the rope was cut, probably didn't get a second chance and ultimately sank, never to return home. As for myself, I eventually resigned. Later, I learned that the reason they didn't want to come was that the area was known to be haunted. Whenever there's a family gathering, ghosts would appear everywhere, both relatives and non-relatives. It was just a coincidence that we encountered a corpse on the way, which overshadowed everything. We didn't even get to the day of the event to meet the ghosts at that house. Some seniors said that it might have been for the best that we encountered the corpse first because during the event, both at that house and the homeowner's house, there would have been many more stories and experiences far more intense. And that's a wrap for today's horror story. I hope everyone enjoyed it and got a good scare. Stay tuned for the next spine-chilling tale I'll be sharing with you. And thank you for listening.